Just a quick disclaimer, I've only seen 30 episodes and I haven't started Ultra Sun or Ultra Moon yet, so my opinions may change. You know, I find it interesting how the changes in the Pokemon Sun and Moon anime have been getting a lot of flack from those who still actively follow the show. Especially because it's in these changes that I find myself enjoying Sun and Moon far more than anything else with Ash in it. Despite being the biggest thing people have been yelling about, I'm only going to briefly touch upon the new art style because other people, which I'll link below, have gone way more into detail than I ever could. Basically, the art style is more simple, but with a light-hearted show like the Pokemon anime, I feel like it fits a bit more. And also, the simplicity allows for more fluid animation, making characters more than just slightly moving cardboard cutouts unlike previous seasons. The battles also got a vast improvement. While X and Y has better battles than Black and White, they still weren't that amazing, and they were only decently animated. They basically abused this over-gimmicky CG camera with the background that just sorta took me out of the experience. Meanwhile, all that Sun and Moon needed was just some good enough animation with some of the best choreography in Pokemon, and it really achieves what people liked about X and Y way more. But more interesting to me is the narrative's change in structure. I've heard many complain about how it only takes place over the few islands, but I feel like this is actually an improvement. However, first we gotta ask, what is the real change here? Many make it out to just be a structural change, but personally I feel like it's more of a genre change. What really happened is it went from being an adventure story to being a slice-of-life show with some drama moments. Really, it went from being like Dragon Ball to being Pokemon Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya. Considering the show is basically required to use Ash, a largely goofy and static main character, I feel like the slice-of-life angle works way better than the adventure narrative, which works way better for the changing characters of the Pokemon Adventures manga. This also finally allows me to answer a question that has stopped me from caring about the show in a long time. What could I get out of it that I couldn't just get out of the way better manga? By focusing on being more slice of life, the Sun and Moon anime allows me to see it as a unique separate entry, rather than just a vastly inferior version of the Adventures manga. And it's in Pokemon Adventures that I can discuss the one thing that I feel has been missing from the Pokemon anime, and that's the tone. If I was to describe the tone aside from the anime in one sentence, it was to be fun on the surface, however if you look closely enough there is a lot of dark undertones. While nothing too morbid has happened just yet, even compared to other anime aimed at a similar age demographic, we have had little sprinkles of hints expounding upon the darker subject matter presented in the Sun and Moon games, rather than just softening them, and generally ignoring them like Black and White did. You ruined the best games! Read the manga instead! Still good! A lot of people have issues with the way filler has been handled in previous seasons, and I don't necessarily think the fact that it has filler that makes it bad like so many people say, but rather just the way it's done. Within the anime community as a whole, filler has sort of been a bad word and has been shunned entirely, but I don't think that's necessarily fair. There are two major reasons why long-running shonen anime are plagued with bad filler. The first and more common reason is to avoid going on hiatus. Because the way time slots work in Japan, going on hiatus would kill the majority of long-running shonen. This becomes an issue when the anime catches up to the source material. Studios can't wait for new content in the source material because they have to produce new episodes to keep their time slot. Usually staff don't have much time to plan these new stories, so they're generally not that well written. Another less talked about reason I've seen for bad filler is because the source material has already ended, but a show has already become so popular that the studio does not want to end it so soon, so they try to milk the cash cow as much as they can with new episodes. But it doesn't really have to be this way. Filler can be used to tell interesting narratives that couldn't be told in the main story, or it can just introduce more character development that was not in the source material. The best use of filler I've ever seen in an anime is Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex. About half the episodes are filler, but it's really not an issue because all the episodes individually are just as great as the main story, and on their own are even better than the vast majority of anime in general. Well, sure, I'm not going to call the filler in Sen anime nearly as great as standalone complexes. It's also interesting how the use of filler is similar compared to most anime, even previous seasons of Pokemon. Really, if I'm gonna compare it to anything, it's gonna be the 90s adaptation of Sailor Moon. Well, sure, a lot of it was only there just because the manga wasn't fully out at the time, and there was times where they didn't know what to put next, so they had to make up something. A lot of the times that something ended up being character development that wasn't even there to begin with. This has made an interesting divide where a lot of people prefer the manga because there's a lot less pointless and stupid aspects to it, but then a lot of people prefer the 90s adaptation because of the characterizations go more in depth. What I'm getting at is a lot of the filler in Sun and Moon does the same thing, and you really get to know the trial captains and other characters from the games far more than in the games, and they're also fleshed out more than most of Ash's other companions. Another thing that helps Sun and Moon's filler way more than previous seasons is the fact that it's actually referred to after the episode it's in, rather than never referenced again. My favorite one was probably the surprisingly depressing storyline between the Stoutland and Litten that occurred over several episodes. Plus, it also just helps that they really tried to tone down Ash's obnoxiousness and tried to make him more like a charming kid instead. I took a break to eat something while trying to think of an ending and saw these. Nobody told me we had these. You know what else they didn't tell me about? Gengar.